After months of frustration and dozens of rejected offers, Stefanie Campagna was beginning to wonder if she would ever be able to buy a home in Rochester, New York. The housing market had become an exhausting gauntlet, one that seemed designed to test the patience and the finances of even the most determined buyers. For 5 months, Campagna's offers were repeatedly turned down, leaving her to question whether her dream of homeownership might remain out of reach. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Then, finally, this month, the breakthrough came. Campagna secured a home, but not without significant sacrifice. To beat out 36 competing bids, she had to pay $100,000 over the asking price. The victory came with relief but also a stark reminder. In today's housing market, even the fortunate often endure grueling battles, stretching their budgets and navigating a web of fierce competition just to secure a property. Her experience reflects a broader, nationwide challenge. Across the United States, prospective homeowners are grappling with a market that has become both expensive and fiercely competitive. Recent weeks have seen former President Donald Trump publicly criticizing the country's largest homebuilders, blaming them for America's affordability crisis. In a social media post, Trump went so far as to compare the homebuilding industry to the oil cartel OPEC, accusing builders of hoarding empty lots to artificially inflate housing prices. While Trump's comments stirred debate, economists largely point to a more complex set of factors behind the nation's housing woes. The roots of the affordability crisis extend back decades, particularly to a long-standing shortage of available homes, a problem that was decades in the making. Housing construction plummeted in the years leading up to the 2008 financial crash, and the industry has never fully recovered. Yet, experts caution against oversimplifying the issue. Builders and economists alike reject the notion that the supply shortage is simply the result of idle land. Instead, they point to a convergence of obstacles that have made homebuilding increasingly difficult: stringent regulations, labor shortages, and rising financing costs. These challenges, they say, have slowed construction and contributed to rising home prices. Some industry observers also worry that political policies, including Trump-era trade and immigration measures, could worsen the situation. Sean Donovan, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under the Obama administration, described the current market conditions as a perfect storm of high demand, low supply, and escalating costs, resulting in what he calls a national housing emergency. "I've been working in housing for 30 years, and I've never seen an affordability crisis this severe," Donovan told CNN. He highlighted local zoning laws and bureaucratic red tape as central obstacles to expanding housing supply. Research supports his view. A study conducted by the National Association of Homebuilders (NAHB) found that nearly a quarter of the price of a newly built single-family home is tied to regulations imposed at the state, local, and federal levels. The NAHB has long lobbied against these regulatory burdens, arguing that they make construction slower and more expensive. According to an analysis by Goldman Sachs, relaxing land use regulations could result in an additional 2.5 million housing units over the next decade, enough to alleviate roughly two-thirds of the estimated housing shortage. Yet such reforms would be difficult to implement because regulations are largely determined at the local level, making widespread change a daunting task. Bureaucratic hurdles aren't just theoretical, they have real, tangible impacts on construction timelines. Oren Amir, founder of Go Home Builders in Los Angeles, recounted that some rebuilding projects in Altadena, a community ravaged by January wildfires, were delayed by contradictory city guidance regarding rooftop solar panels. The result? Homes that communities desperately need are held up by procedural confusion and regulatory barriers. The housing shortage has increasingly spread beyond traditional high-demand coastal cities to rural and suburban areas, including Republican strongholds. This has prompted some unexpected cooperation between political parties, as leaders from both sides of the aisle recognize the need to streamline regulations to boost housing supply. For instance, California Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, recently signed legislation allowing for increased density near transit hubs in certain counties, effectively overriding local zoning laws. Meanwhile, Montana Governor Greg Gianforte, a Republican, has enacted similar measures aimed at boosting housing development and reducing regulatory obstacles. However, government regulations are not the only barrier to construction. Community resistance, often referred to as NIMBYISM, or "Not in my backyard," continues to impede new housing projects. Concerns range from fears of overcrowding to worries about changes in neighborhood character. Donovan emphasized that such opposition remains a major hurdle. "We need to help communities understand we're not talking about building skyscrapers in their backyard," he said. Rochester, New York, exemplifies the intense pressure of today's market. Zillow's Market Heat Index lists the city among the hottest housing markets in the country. A combination of post-pandemic demand and chronic underbuilding has left buyers competing aggressively, with offers often tens of thousands of dollars above the listing price. Campagna described one open house as resembling an outdoor concert, with over 100 potential buyers vying for a single property. Not all regions face such acute shortages. In Sun Belt states like Texas and Florida, sustained construction over recent years has helped moderate prices, and in some areas, even driven them down. Texas, in particular, benefits from a lack of statewide zoning laws, which eases the path for new developments. Yet even in these more flexible markets, industry leaders worry about the impact of federal policies. Immigration crackdowns, for example, threaten to reduce the already limited pool of skilled construction workers. Jim Tobin, CEO of the NAHB, stressed the need for federal action to allow legal work opportunities for nonviolent undocumented immigrants, proposing visa programs similar to those used in agriculture and technology sectors. Trade policies have also contributed to rising costs. New tariffs on construction materials, including softwood lumber and kitchen fixtures, have increased the expense of building homes. Research from UBS found that Trump's 10% lumber tariff alone adds about $720 to the cost of an average home, while tariffs on cabinets and vanities add roughly $280. Overall, tariffs are estimated to increase construction costs by approximately $8,900 per home, an expense builders inevitably pass on to buyers. The story of Stefanie Campagna illustrates a broader reality. Buying a home today is a high-stakes, often exhausting challenge. Supply constraints, bureaucratic hurdles, regulatory burdens, and rising costs converge to create a market where patience, persistence, and financial flexibility are prerequisites for success. And while solutions exist, from easing zoning laws to reforming immigration policies, the path to a more affordable and accessible housing market remains complex, requiring coordination across local, state, and federal levels, as well as shifts in public perception and political will. The housing market in Rochester, New York, had become something of a battlefield, and Stefanie Campagna felt like she was fighting a losing war. For 5 long months, she had been navigating a world of rejection, frustration, and growing self-doubt. Each offer she placed on a home seemed to vanish into the ether, swallowed by more aggressive bids or buyers willing to pay sums far beyond her reach. She began to wonder if homeownership, something she had long considered inevitable, was slipping out of her grasp entirely. She had saved, planned, and imagined the moment she would finally unlock the door to her own home, the one place where she could settle, build a life, and create memories. Yet each rejection chipped away at her optimism, leaving her exhausted and disheartened. Her friends and family could offer sympathy and encouragement, but they could not feel the sting of losing yet another property to a competitor willing to stretch their finances even further. And then, after what felt like an eternity, a breakthrough came. A seller finally said yes, and Campagna had secured the home she had dreamed about for months. But the victory was far from simple. To succeed, she had to outbid 36 other offers and pay $100,000 over the asking price. The relief she felt walking through the front door of that home was intertwined with a sharp awareness of the cost, both financial and emotional, that the journey had demanded. Her story was emblematic of a larger crisis affecting cities and towns across the nation, a crisis where even the fortunate few who succeed often do so through extreme perseverance and an ability to stretch beyond comfortable limits. This story of individual struggle exists against the backdrop of a national housing emergency. Across the United States, buyers like Campagna are increasingly confronted with fierce competition and soaring prices. In recent weeks, former President Donald Trump made headlines by targeting the largest homebuilders, accusing them of contributing to the affordability crisis. In a social media post, he compared homebuilders to the oil cartel OPEC, claiming that companies were sitting on empty lots in order to manipulate supply and keep prices artificially high. These claims, though dramatic, simplify a far more complex reality. Economists emphasize that the roots of the crisis extend far deeper than corporate strategy or opportunism. The nation has been grappling with a chronic shortage of homes for decades, a problem exacerbated by historical trends, economic policy.